What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Welcome to Pop Culture Clash. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone who didn't know Disney. They're an international juggernaut that has acquired most of your favorite intellectual properties. But even without all that, they've built their own brand from the ground up by searing themselves onto the childhood of generations. A big part of those beloved animated classics is the fantasy-style stories, generally revolving around a conventional prince-princess story, with some unconventional aspects thrown in. And Disney wasted no time capitalizing on their success, making these princesses into icons. So once again, in my mind, I think, how does this relate to Pokémon? So, we'll be going back through all of them chronologically and seeing if we can find teams that would fit. Now, for this exercise, we will only be considering those individuals officially recognized by Disney themselves under the Disney Princess banner. Those being Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, Pocahontas, Mulan, Tiana, Rapunzel, and Merida. So no matter how popular some other characters are or how deserving they might be, they've yet to be officially inducted into this exclusive club. If you have a problem with that, you can check Disney's official website and take it up with them. The first Disney princess was also the first ever feature-length animation work with color and sound in Snow White. And of course, you can't have Snow White without thinking about the 7 dwarves. But of course you can only have 6 Pokémon, so we'll have to eliminate one. And to me, it's an easy choice, since I don't know of too many Pokémon that have a medical degree. So first off, we have Pokémon that fit with the dwarves by name, like with the dwarf Happy having Happiny. And similarly, for one of the most popular dwarves, Grumpy, we have Grumpig, even though it doesn't actually look all that grumpy sometimes. And then of course there's the species match name, with Slowpoke being the dopey Pokémon. But even if that weren't the case, it is very clearly a dope. Then you have Sneezy, and while there's no Sneeze Pokémon, I think that Cubchoo might step up to the occasion. There's also Sleepy, so ideally a Pokémon that's always asleep, like Komala. And then there's Bashful, which could be the hardest one, but I think that Whismur might fit the bill. It's clearly a timid Pokémon. Well, not actually timid like in its nature, but you get it. So for Snow White, I think these Pokémon are solid 6 out of the 7 dwarves, and also fit her rather well. The next princess didn't appear until over a decade later with Cinderella, whose glass slippers became such a classic that it spawned countless imitators. Now, at the start of the story, she's essentially locked in her filthy tower, and her only friends are the small animals, mostly being mice. The big 2 of those being Jacques and Gus. So to me, Minccino and Alolan Raticate are pretty good parallels for those 2. But then there's also the female mice, and I don't want them to feel left out, so we'll also add in Dedenne as a representative as well. Then of course there's the enemy of the mice in Lucifer the Cat. While not an ally of the princess per se, it is a staple of the movie's iconography, which is just as important. So I think that Purloin would be a good Pokémon to have for this spot. Not only is it a cat, but it can clearly conjure up some serious attitude. And then of course there's the ever-critical Fairy Godmother, without whom there would be no story. A fairy would probably be most appropriate, so I think that we could go with Mega Gardevoir. Not only is it a fairy in a dress, but it's a psychic type, so it's capable of possessing powerful magical abilities that would be required for spells of this magnitude. Speaking of which, we need our transportation, in this case being a pumpkin carriage, and there's only one Pokémon for the job, Gourgeist. For obvious reasons, this Pokémon is perfect for Cinderella, and is a good choice to round out her team as a whole. Now we have Princess Aurora, who is the titular Sleeping Beauty. This of course means that a sleep-related Pokémon is necessary, but if you ask me, Snorlax is the one to fill the role. Snorlax does sleep often, but can also wake up when the need arises, much like Aurora. Now for this story, we also have the Fairy Godmother aspect, but this time there were 3 of them. Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather means 3 more fairy types, which I think would be best served as Tapu Lele, Florges, and Tapu Fini. I think the colorings and general disposition of these Pokemon make them good stand-ins for the benevolent sprites. Then of course there's the antagonist of the story, Maleficent. This classy yet intimidating villain can famously turn into a dragon, and looking down the list, the one that I think would work the best is Mega Charizard X. Sure, the fire's not green, but the black and the dragon typing make the comparison undeniable in my mind. And then of course there's the crux of the story, which revolves around the spinning wheel, which does raise some issue because there aren't too many wheel-based Pokemon. But I think Dhelmise could be a good representative. It's got a wheel as part of its structure, and it even has the sharp ends that could break the skin to deliver the powerful spell. So in the end, I think these Pokemon could be a good team for Aurora. Huh, I didn't mean for it to be so powerful. I guess she'd have to be at least an Elite Four member, if not the champion. It was several decades between princesses, but we finally got Ariel. This little mermaid is from a fantastical underwater world filled with mer-people, which could only make me think of Primarina. This Alola starter is without a doubt the closest Pokemon that we've had to a mermaid, so I think it's a no-brainer. Then of course we have her friends, mainly being Flounder the fish. Now Flounder is not what you would call the bravest of sea creatures, so I thought a good fit might be Wishy-Washy. The solo form, of course, since the schooled form wouldn't really work here. By themselves, these little slivers of fish are quite nervous looking and fit the scaredy catfish personality well. Next we have the underwater musical maestro of Sebastian the Crab. And while there are actual crab Pokemon, I think the one that best fits this situation is Corphish. Sebastian has lots of personality in his song and dance numbers, and Corphish has personality to spare, so I think it's a fine match. Then of course there's Scuttle the Seagull, the supposed expert regarding the human world. Obvious thoughts go to Wingull as his replacement. It may even do this Pokemon some good to have a positive image in the public eye for once. Then there are the creepy henchman eels in the story as well, which of course means that Electric is in order. I could see it pulling off some eerie villainous roles. But henchmen are nothing without someone to serve, in this case being Ursula. This evil water witch I think would be best represented by Toxapex. While not an octopus, it is a purple tentacle monster with a mischievous side. So as a stand-in for the antagonist, I think this merciless poison type would be just about perfect. Given that Ariel is a princess of the ocean, it does make sense that she'd have mostly water, but I think she could make it work. The next princess is the beautiful French intellectual Belle. Not only is she my favorite princess of them all, but one of the best role models for young people to imitate, showing an interest in reading and science. However, she did have one of the toughest team configurations to date. First of her group of friends is Lumiere, the suave candle. This of course led me to choose Litwick. While some people might think of its evolved forms, I think it's important to keep the wax feature going. Then we have his best frenemy, Cogsworth. I have special personal attachment to this character, however there are no specific clock Pokemon. But after thinking, I believe that Magearna might fit best. It's the same general shape and has all of the gears for its internal workings. There's also not a teapot Pokemon for Mrs. Potts, however I think we could do something with her son, Chip. Lotad is a Pokemon that can hold liquids in its head and has a chip in the back. It may not be perfect, but it works for our purposes. And now we come to the other half of the title with the Beast. There were a number of possible potential choices for ferocious, beastly Pokemon, but I opted for Zoroark. It's got the general aspects of the design, and could easily be seen as a fierce but still sympathetic creature. But if we have the Beast, we should also have his opposite in Gaston. Gaston is a handsome exterior, hiding something vain underneath. And I couldn't shake the thought that Cobalion could work here. It is quite a regal and proud-looking Pokemon. And let us not forget the most important detail, the antlers. And lastly, a very important aspect of this lovely story is the enchanted rose that is the symbol of the curse placed upon the Beast, and is also the ticking clock against which the goal must be completed. This makes me think that Roselia would make a nice final addition to the team, being one of the most important icons in the bunch. So, for my favorite princess, I think this is a good spread of Pokemon from the cute to the powerful, the beautiful and the beastly. Next up, a year later, we got Princess Jasmine in Aladdin. She's not your average princess, since she doesn't really even want to be one, and looks for ways to sneak out of her luxurious palace. Her only friend on the inside is her tiger, Raja, who is nice and cuddly but also a valiant protector. This obviously means that Jasmine gets Incineroar. This rough-and-tumble tiger would be the perfect counterpart for her pet, and be able to readily handle itself as a battler. For other sidekicks, we have Abu, who, despite being a bit greedy, is a loyal monkey to have by your side. This makes me think that Apom would be an excellent fit. Not only is it purple like Abu's outfit, but it's got the personality facet down pat. Then we have the Magic Carpet, which is a bit harder since there are no carpet Pokemon, but I think it could be feasible to have Mantine fill that role. It's not only a flying type, but it's large enough to have several people ride on it at once. Then we have what is probably the most important part of the story with the Genie. This charismatic magical being is the character that kickstarts the major portions of the plot. It may not be perfect, but I think that Thundurus could fit here. He's a buff blue guy with facial hair that could pull off the powerful or the goofy. Much more so to me than either of the Hoopa forms. Next we have Iago, who while starting as a henchman, did go on to join the heroes in subsequent appearances. And really only Chatot could step into this role, as the only parrot-like Pokemon, and also capable of higher speech than most others as well. And finally, there is Jafar, who has no real one-to-one parallel. However, his main trick is using his Golden Serpent Staff to hypnotize his victims. This Golden Cobra makes me think that Shiny Arbok could be the last member of the team. While maybe not as mesmerizing, this Gold Snake is more than capable of taking out enemies just as well, and helps to round out the team almost perfectly. Pocahontas was the next princess to grace our screens. Her main friend is Miko the raccoon. And while I know it's not based solely on a raccoon, Zigzagoon is the choice that comes to my mind. It's a small, cute, masked animal, and can be just as bumbling as the original. And along with Miko, there of course is Flit the hummingbird. Again, we run into the problem of no real hummingbird Pokemon, but bear with me. What if Pick-a-Pick was the one? It's a small bird with a tiny beak, and while they may not be used for the same purpose, I think that we could get away with it here. Next on Pocahontas' side, we have the Grandmother Willow, the magical tree full of wisdom that allows the characters to communicate despite having different languages. To me, Trevenant would be a fine replacement, being a sort of tree with a spirit inside and a face right in the middle. It doesn't have to be scary just because it's a ghost type, you know. Also in the movie, we have the small pooch Percy, which is an obvious opportunity for Snubbull to step into the limelight. Not only as a dog, but for the fact that it absolutely nails the snooty nature of this stuck-up British pup. And I don't really have a Pokemon for the British settlers. However, I think that Pocahontas' dad, the chief of the tribe, could have a decent shot. For that, I think Xatu could be a good choice, not only based on Native American iconography, but also being a very stately and pensive Pokemon, always looking to the future and to the past. And finally, since the song has been in my head for the past several days, and due to its significance in the story, I think that we need some colors of the wind. And some might disagree, but I think Mega Pidgeot would be the best. It's not only got extra colorful plumage, but often uses wind-based attacks complemented by its no-guard ability. So this isn't the team that I might have expected from Pocahontas, but it's certainly one that fits everything that she has shown us. I would like to go on record as saying that for years, I have firmly stood my ground that Mulan is in no way an actual princess. Just go back and watch it if you don't believe me. However, I will grant you that she is a Disney princess, since it is their category to do with what they please. So, First off, we have Mushu, who, despite being a tiny little dragon, I think is best represented by Salandit. None of those other base dragons really seem to pull off the same charisma as this other fire lizard was able to. Then of course we have Cricky, who's the best Disney cricket since Jiminy. This calls for one of the most popular cries in the Pokemon games with Cricketune. While maybe not quite as lucky, I'm sure that this Pokemon would just be happy to be given a chance. Also of high importance in this story is the horse, Con. It's hard to go to war back in those days without one. Being black, I thought Zebstrika might be the best replacement, and even though it's not a zebra itself, there are only so many horse Pokemon, but we'll get to that in a bit. But Mulan also has human friends. Other men who were drafted into the army and learned to trust her. And as sort of an all-in-one, I think that we could have Sokk. Not only are the clothes the same, but it's sort of a nice middle ground between all their exaggerated proportions. Being a warrior, Mulan's sword is of utmost importance to her survival, not to mention her family's honor. This is an open invitation for the sword Pokemon Honedge to join the party. This sharp, ghostly weapon would be an ideal companion for battle, even being able to operate independently. And lastly, I couldn't find any Hun Pokemon. I guess Kangaskhan would be a Mongol, but there is that evil bird on Shan Yu's shoulder. This striking bird of prey immediately made me think of Staraptor. This ultra-buff regional bird is intimidating and powerful, able to slide right into taking a walk on the wild side. The Pokemon for this warrior woman show a wide range of battling prowess, but isn't using that to win the point of her story in the first place. It was a little bit until the next princess, but we eventually got Tiana in The Princess and the Frog. Tiana herself actually spent a fair amount of screen time as a frog, making me think that Politoed would be an appropriate choice. While not my favorite water type, it is the most stereotypical frog of the bunch. That also leads to her prince, that being Naveen, who was turned into a frog first. For this one, I think Froakie might be an acceptable stand-in. It's spunky enough that it could maybe pull off the pompous attitude that Naveen can give off. One of Tiana's sidekick characters is Ray the Firefly. He immediately takes to the amphibian pair and helps guide them through the bayou. So we'll add in Volbeat, since it's one of only two options, but I think that it is the better one in this case. It might be a little big to Ray's size, but just having a Firefly on board is what counts. Then on the opposite end of the size spectrum, we have Lewis the Alligator. This friendly reptile could only be properly represented by Feraligatr himself, giving off the appropriate level of raw power. This story also delved deep into the occult, with Dr. Facilier having powerful magic from his friends on the other side. I feel that these unforgiving spirits could be well embodied by Spiritomb. The color scheme alone works, but the 100 or so souls trapped within the keystone seem a perfect parallel for me. And lastly, we have magic on the good side as well with Mama Odie. Not at all your traditional sort of fairy godmother, but she gets the job done. It's a little out there, but maybe Oranguru could make it work. It's a bit similar looking, if you ask me, and also has those psychic powers to get the magic done. So, Tiana made it out with a tougher team than I expected, but that's pretty fitting for this go-getter. Rapunzel was the next princess to come out of Disney in Tangled, which is a bit underrated if you ask me, but her best friend is the chameleon Pascal. He's quite the loyal companion and should not be underestimated due to his size. So clearly the only Pokemon that will do is Kecleon, who should also not be underestimated due to its arsenal of tricks. In Tangled, maybe more than any other story, has a horse at the front and center of the action with Maximus. He is stubborn but devoted to his cause to the bitter end. So, I think the original horse Pokemon Rapidash would be a good fit. Not only can it also be stubborn, but with its horn it's got a built-in weapon right there. And then of course, there's the main aspect of the story itself, Rapunzel's hair. Her 70 plus feet of hair can be used in a number of different scenarios, so I think it's appropriate to add Tangela to her team. While its hair might be made of vines, it's clearly got a lot of it all together, and can be used in battle just like Rapunzel's. Not only is Rapunzel's hair long, but it's also magical. With the proper song, her hair has healing properties. This made me think of Comfey, who has the signature ability Triage that gives priority to healing moves. Not to mention that Rapunzel wears flowers in her hair, and that the source of her hair's magic was a sun-based flower. Speaking of the sun, it's quite an important icon in this story, appearing throughout the kingdom as a symbol of royalty. This calls for Soul Rock getting in on some of the action. This underrated psychic type would hold its own while putting on proud display the birthright of this princess. And then there's Lantern, I guess? You know, since they have all those lanterns floating around. Look, it may not be perfect, but this one seemed a bit harder than some of the other ones. However, I do think that this team is a suitable representation of the movie, and can help Rapunzel on her way to victory. And finally, at the time of this recording, the last character to be inducted into the category of Disney Princess is Merida from the movie Brave. Being an expert archer, the only real choice here is to have Decidueye. As the only Pokemon with a natural bow and natural arrows, there's really no other option to join this young Scottish girl. Merida also has another faithful mount with the huge horse Angus. For a steed as impressive as this, I could only imagine Mudsdale stepping into the role. This giant earthen equine is perfect for the job and helps to elevate the team. Another aspect of the tale revolves around Merida's brothers, who through the course of events get themselves turned into little bears, which led me to add Teddiursa to the team. It's definitely got the chops to pull off the same sort of shenanigans that those troublemakers get into. Also, up in the Highlands, we see forest spirits known as the Will of the Wisp, which can alter the course of the entire story. So for this force, I propose using Ghastly, specifically the shiny version. This blue ghost fits perfectly with the movie's interpretation, and it can even learn the move Will-O-Wisp, so it would work out just fine. One of the central points of opposition is the gigantic, almost titan-like bear that stalks the humans in the wild. This monster is almost unstoppable, so for a huge and fierce bear, there's no better selection than Ursaring. It doesn't matter that we've already used its pre-evolution. I feel that this powerful forest dweller will lay to rest any doubts you might have once it starts to battle. But of course, no tale would be complete without a little magic. And this one has a witch as well. While she's a bit more eccentric than some of the others, she's definitely worth the inclusion. And so I thought that the mage Pokemon of Delphox would be a fine replacement. While maybe not the most popular starter, it certainly fills the role of a witch without question. This team of Meridas is an eclectic one, but I'm sure that these Pokemon could work, if you're brave enough to try. So, those are the Pokemon teams that I would give to each of the Disney princesses. Now, as I said, there are plenty of other characters that could easily be added to this exercise, like one of the most influential female Disney characters of Nala, but I'm hopeful that it could expand one day. I personally hope that since Disney has now acquired Fox, they might include Anastasia in this category as well. So, even if your reflection shows that you're the fairest of them all, and you want adventure in the great wide somewhere just around the river bend, to be a part of that whole new world, you don't have to wonder when will your life begin. You can know that your fate is within you, because you're almost there once upon a dream. After all, a dream is a wish your heart makes. So, how would you match up these lovely ladies of Disney with Pokemon? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!